I have this memory of being really, really depressed when I had my mental breakdown in 2011. I remember I'd just gotten out of the psych ward. I'd been on a psychiatric hold there for nearly a week. I was treatment-resistant depression with panic disorder, anxiety, depersonalization. I had not experienced more than just an ounce of improvement in my symptoms. That included horrendous suicidality and the most bleak and hopeless disposition you could ever imagine. I remember thinking nobody would ever understand what I was going through. No one ever could understand what I was going through. I was so convinced that there was something completely and permanently wrong with my brain. I'd had a paradoxical reaction to a medication known as Vivitrol. I've talked about it a lot on the channel, and every once in a while I like to bring this story up where I took a medication and I had an unusual response that spiraled me into 30 pounds lost nearly in 30 days, into being lost in a dreamlike state, a panic, couldn't sleep, and I just wanted to end my life every second of every day for a very, very long time. And so I was many months and nearly a year into this treatment-resistant depression, and I was convinced I was going to die. I just didn't know when, didn't know how, but I couldn't possibly survive much longer. And one of the most sad things to reflect on, because I was obviously very new in my mood disorder, was the certainty I had that everything wasn't going to be okay, and the guarantee that no one else has ever been through what I was going through. Mental health wasn't something that was widely discussed in my home growing up, even though I would later find out that my mom had experienced some mental health issues and that there was some mental health issues amongst people I knew, but it wasn't something that was widely spoken about. So there was a lack of identification. And I guess I'm making this video to say that thinking you're hopeless doesn't actually make you hopeless. I was out of the psych ward. Someone put a book in my hand. If you're a long timer, you know this story, and it's a worthy story to retell, but someone put a book in my hand called When Going Through Hell, Don't Stop. And again, at this point, I was completely convinced that no one had ever been as depressed as I was. No one had ever been as suicidal as I was. No one had ever been as messed up mentally as I was. So therefore, no one could tell me anything different. But I finally read a book from a guy named Douglas Block, who I adore, whom you guys should follow here on YouTube, called When Going Through Hell, Don't Stop. And it was his memoir. And for the first time ever, for the very first time ever, I read my story in the words of someone who could articulate what I was experiencing better than I could possibly explain it. I identified. It was the first time I realized I wasn't alone. And one of the most foul aspects of depression, treatment resistant or not, clinical or not, or acute sadness even, situational sadness, trauma, tragedy, despair, grief, is that it's so difficult to see outside of it. When you're actually in it. Most of us would benefit greatly from leadership and from community and from camaraderie, because you can't imagine feeling any different than you feel, and that's normal. But if you don't believe that anyone's ever experienced what you're experiencing, and if misery outweighs hope, that's when things get dangerous. That's where we lose some people. And I don't want you to be one of those people, and I'm glad I'm not one of those people. I really thought I was going to be. I read Douglas's memoir, and I found my story. And so I clung to that until eventually, in spite of myself, I got better. I got better from a treatment-resistant depression that, for all intents and purposes, looked hopeless. Lasted into the years before we found out what was wrong with me. So, among many things, but the main thing that was keeping me from getting better. So, all that said, I care about each and every human being who's ever experienced grief and sadness and depression and anxiety and mental health or harsh life circumstances. There's a little kid inside of you that just needs to be nurtured when you're that sick. I think that little kid lives in all of us, whether we're stable or not. But that little kid is in desperate need of comfort and that inner child, right? And so what I want to do is just encourage all of you to hold on and to be brave and to find someone you can identify with. Stop at nothing until you hear the right podcast, you read the right story, you meet the right person, you check into the right group, you find the right professional, until you find someone you trust, until you find someone you believe understands the pain you're going through and who can hold your wellness the belief of your wellness for you until you're willing to believe yourself. One thing that I do believe is very simply true about my story and how I've overcome the things I have is just that I survived. Sometimes I want there to be like this incredibly profound, prolific, and beautiful, sexy explanation to how to get out of depression, how to overcome anxiety, how to beat panic disorder, how to eventually work through trauma and all those things. But at the end of the day, when it really came down to it, it's survival. There can be a stretch of time where you're fighting for negative happiness, where you're just a little less in pain and you're surviving until that miracle comes, even if you don't believe it will. So something someone once said to me, which was fairly powerful, and maybe it would be powerful for you too, coming from someone who's experienced life-threatening mood disorder, I don't need or want anyone to necessarily believe anything, but I want you to believe that I believe that your healing, your wellness, your contentment, your stability is still out there. It still exists. It still matters. And you cannot prove otherwise. You just can't. That's a fact. So feel your feelings. Be sad. Be down if you're down. But don't give up. Don't give up. You have no idea what tomorrow will bring. You have no idea who you will meet or what treatment will come or what group will be there or what will pass or how your brain will respond, etc. You just don't know. And one of the most comforting things I can say to anyone is that once you're on the other side with time, once you trust it, you do forget just how acutely uncomfortable you are right now, and you can return to a life that you think is actually worth living. You just have to believe that I believe, and you have to go find someone you trust and someone you can identify with. Until I found Douglas, until I read his story, I was convinced I was alone. And that's a really tough place to be when you can barely breathe. That's a really tough place to be when you can't see past the gray, when color is no longer visible, when food loses its taste, when blankets lose their warmth and comfort, when connection is lost in touch. You have to believe someone's been there before and can show you how to get out. You might not know when, you might not know what, but you know that it's possible. It matters. So if this video has offered you even just a flicker of hope that keeps you moving until we figure out what's going to get you all the way through, then good. I did my job, and I can hold space for you like that, as people have held space for me and continue to in times of want and certainly in times of need. So be brave. Hang in there. One day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time. You can get through what you're going through. We can do hard things. We really, really can. And beyond that, I'm sorry that you're suffering. It's not fair. But I believe in your wellness. I'll put a link to Doug's book, When Going Through Hell Don't Stop. This is not something I'm affiliated with, so there's no sponsorship or anything. It's just the book that helped save my life. Maybe it'll help save yours. And and if you haven't told anyone just how sad you are or how much you're struggling, I want you to take this opportunity just to put in the comment section a little bit of your truth. Let people know you think you're hopeless. Let people know you're overwhelmed, that life's been hard. Get it out there. Purge some of it from your body, and don't be embarrassed. Don't be ashamed. It's okay to not be okay. 100%. But survive. Okay? Just survive for now. That can be enough. And if you're watching this and you're doing well and you're stable, I'm just as sad as I am for those that are hurting. I'm so happy for you if you're doing well. Celebrate it, live it, express it, spread it. And then, of course, whenever possible, use it for good and be there for someone, if you can, who could really use a moment of your time. Something I have to remind myself constantly. I get away from it without even meaning to, and then it always brings me back. Because once you've been to hell, you can't pretend that other people aren't there, even if you've escaped it. So you got to find that balance. And that's what I got for you today. I'm on a mission to make 30 videos in 30 days. I was looking through the videos I'd made, and we hadn't really touched on mental health. And I'm grateful. Mine's been pretty fantastic for a little stretch here, fairly long stretch here, which is great. But some of you are hurting. and you're not alone. My name is Noah, and we will see you guys in the next video. Adios.